No position update from Roaring Kitty, but a fascinating day in the options chain. I want to walk through the position that he has and what it looks like today, even though we haven't seen the latest. I'm going off of what he shared previously, but then I definitely want to dive into what I'm seeing in the options chain because there's some really interesting activity that can have some pretty significant implications for what we're seeing in GameStop. So let's dive right in. Right now, what I've done is kind of crossed out the last prices and updated with what they are as of now, even though technically GameStop is right around 26 after hours. It closed at 25.46, so left it there. And then the 20 calls that he has, they're trading for 635. This is the mid price. This is really important to drive home. This mid price is not what he would get if he chose to close all 120,000 of these calls. Because as he starts unwinding this, the market would start to move. So what that means is I'm quoting it at the midpoint, but that's not what he actually would be able to execute at. That doesn't mean that he would be completely eviscerated and not be able to make a market. Obviously, the market makers will provide a market, but it's just important to note that this would look slightly different if he chooses to liquidate the position all at once, which I don't imagine he would do. He's done things in phases so far. And it also seems like he seems to prefer to exercise his options, which is another interesting layer to this. So taking a look at the 5 million shares at 21,274, right now, those would be worth about 20.9 million. And these long calls would be worth about 8.1 million. So that takes his P&L to about 29 million bucks unrealized on these positions. And he still would presumably have the 29.4 million in cash. So we did get to see a couple hilarious memes from him today. We got this one from The Office. We have the GameStop logo and then the kitty in the pocket over here and then a sweet mullet. And then over here we have the unbelievable humor of breaking news on CNBC with our boy Roaring Kitty just chilling in his chair. And the beginning of this video is epic. It's the clip from Inglourious Bastards where the dude says, you know, this might be my masterpiece. It's, yeah, couldn't agree more. This is a masterpiece. So let's take a look at the options chain because this is where things start to get a bit interesting. If we take a look at the volume, which to be clear, volume is different than open interest. Open interests are contracts that are currently open. It means that there's a buyer and seller on both sides of that contract. Volume are the number of contracts traded in a day. So this volume could represent buying contracts and opening new ones. This can also represent closing contracts where volume can lead to a decrease in OI, which is actually what I think might be happening here to some degree. Now, the 21 June 24th, this is Roaring Kitty's chain right now, and I do believe it's his chain. And if you look through the volume for today, let's take a scan down together. I see 21, 3, 39, 797, pretty big number, 761, 93,266. Keep going, 676, 588, 38, 592, so on and so forth. The next largest volume for today was at 27,182 volume, which is at the 30. And then we see out to the 35, 8628. Now, from an options trading perspective, this is always funny because this is anchoring. Human beings like round numbers. So you'll notice that the 30s have more volume in OI. The 35s have more volume in OI. That's kind of standard fare. Humans are pretty predictable in that sense. It's kind of interesting. It's actually what makes options so interesting is that you can pick up on a lot of these small behaviors and actually trade them. Now, this is interesting. This amount of volume is anomalous. And if we take a look at the existing open interest, it's 169,963 contracts. So it's really difficult to say whether or not this is Kitty starting to unwind. Even if this was all his volume, which I absolutely do not think it is, it still would leave a lot of his position open. My guess is this would be a mix of people involved transacting. And what could be happening here is some of that cashless exercise that we talked about. And really all that is a method for him to capitalize on some of the P&L of his options position, because even though it's not a massive P&L, he's still up $8.1 million. So he could always essentially trade even half of this position, 60,000. He could then take the 4 million that he would generate from that and use that 4 million to buy shares at spot price. Now, we can confirm a little bit more of that if we take a look at the stock volume for today, which is mostly sale volume. The vast majority of the volume that we saw today was on the sell side. So if we zoom in on this bar, it looks about 140 of that is sale volume. So again, kind of the majority there. So what does this mean for Roaring Kitty's position? Well, as far as I can tell, a few things could be happening. The first one, like we talked about, cashless exercise, I do think that could be on the table for him, because we know he does not have the free cash in order to generate probably the size of the long shares he would want to hold. The other thing that could be happening that I'm not convinced is happening yet is if we look through the other options chains, I don't see corresponding volume. So even if we take a subset of this 93 and assume 30 or 60 of it is his, if I go out to the 19 July expiration and I look at the volume for today, I don't see enough volume that would add up to anything kind of close to his size, unless he's a much smaller subset of that, which he could be. He could be unwinding in 10,000 lot blocks, and that actually seems to be probably what he did to enter, although he definitely had some larger blocks to get into the position. Now, you might be asking, why am I using these expirations? These are the standard expirations as compared to the weeklies. There's more liquidity in here. So to prove that point, if we come here to this 9 days to expiration, we go to the at the money strike right now, the 26s, they're a 58 delta and they're 5 cents wide. If we go out here to the next expiration, we use the at the money, you'll notice how much wider all of these are. And that's for a reason. It's because there's less people in these expiration cycles. If you take a look at the open interest, there's still open interest there, to be clear, but it's nowhere near as much as you'll see in the primary expiration cycles. And that's almost always going to be the case. Unless there's an event or something like that that would funnel people into a specific expiration. People are looking for liquidity, especially larger traders. They're trying to transact at the fairest prices available. So now, if we go out here, we looked at the 19 July, if we go out here to the 16 AUG and I start looking through, the volume for today is still not that impressive. Now, these two block trades, these are interesting to me. And it's because they're a very similar size, 1,786, 1,785. However, based on what I've seen so far from Roaring Kitty, he kind of keeps his position super simple. If you'll notice, he has two positions. He has the shares and then one expiration. So I'm not convinced that this would be him either. He doesn't seem like he was going to go to the 26 and the 27. Again, not outside the realm of possibility, but it's just not what I'm seeing so far. All I can say definitively as of this point is something's happening here. There's no doubt. 93,000 volume in these contracts is not insignificant. And if we just do the math on this, we know 120,000 of these were his. So just following the logic here, that means some of these probably are his. If this turns out to be a mix of buy and sell volume, there could be the alternate scenario where this is just a bunch of buys. Could be. And if this is a bunch of buys, that means none of this might be unwound. And that means most of this might be positive change in open interest adding to the position. So what I'm trying to highlight here is that you can't definitively tell from what you see from at least this picture so far. Again, what I can tell, something's happening in this strike, which is interesting because it's his. This is a giant amount of volume relative to what I've seen, at least so far. This could be a mix of buy and sell volume, which means it could be Kitty unwinding some of his position to either buy more shares or it could be him rolling out in time, or it could be a bunch of people getting into the trade, or it could be a mix of both of those, where most of that volume is a bunch of people getting into the trade and maybe he's unwinding some of it, or maybe he just bought a bunch more. We won't know until tomorrow. It's too early. But we are following the breadcrumbs, eagerly awaiting his next update. I got to say, because it would make all this investigative work much easier, but I am just too interested to not continue following this long on a daily basis. It's way too fascinating. So I want to thank you all again for sharing your community with me. The apes have been so cool. I'm getting a chance to learn so much about this saga. It's a blast. I've been in markets for 16 years. There's just not too many instances to see really, really interesting things like this happening, especially with options, which is kind of where I tend to operate. So I'm having an absolute ball learning alongside you guys. If you have any questions, throw them in the comments. I'll see you guys later.